Hey everyone, I'm Jim Huling, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you to this episode of Execution Insights. Today, I want to start with a question. Have you ever had the experience when a leader walks into the room and without saying a word, something shifts? You know what I mean? People look up, the room kind of settles, and the tension sort of drops just a little. There's a kind of presence that some leaders bring with them. It's a weight and a steadiness that everyone can feel from the moment they arrive. And I want to tell you honestly, I think that kind of presence is what we need more now than at any time I can ever remember. In fact, with everything the people who follow us are carrying right now, all the pressure, all the uncertainty, even the exhaustion, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do as leaders isn't a brilliant strategy or a stirring speech. It's simply in the way we show up. Because presence gets misunderstood all the time. You know, some people think it's about confidence or charisma or outward polish. Some people think it's about whether you cross your arms or make eye contact, and all of those things are probably part of the formula. But real presence doesn't start on the outside. I know this for sure. Real presence starts on the inside. Presence is the inner steadiness that when you walk into the room, everyone can feel. And in reality, it's your own clarity, your own groundedness, your own conviction that they feel long before you say a single word. You know, I don't believe people respond to how impressive you look, obviously. I think people respond to what you carry, what you bring. Presence isn't a performance. Presence is brought as a gift. And there's one moment in my life that I will never forget that taught me everything I'm sharing with you today. It's a moment from my own leadership, and I want to share it not because I handled it perfectly. In fact, in just a minute, you'll realize I didn't, but because it taught me something that I've never forgotten. Years ago, in my time as a CEO, a sudden downturn in the market forced me into one of the hardest responsibilities I've ever had, restructuring the entire company. It affected real people, people I truly cared about, people who had given their heart and talent to their work, and it weighed on me in a way that honestly, I still feel right in this moment. And when the day came to address the entire company, to let them know what was going to be happening, I remember vividly walking toward the auditorium and trying to decide what kind of leader to be when I stepped on that stage. Now, part of me felt the pressure to project strength, to walk in with confidence and bravado and to kind of reassure everybody that I had everything under control. But that wasn't true. And so somewhere on the way to that stage, something in me shifted. And I realized that pretending to be unshakable wouldn't help anyone, and it certainly wouldn't help me. You see, what people needed in that moment wasn't bravado. It was honesty and steadiness and conviction. So when I stood in front of them, I'm so glad to tell you that I didn't try to be inspiring. I just tried to be true. I told them that the road ahead was going to be really difficult, and I told them we would all feel it. But I also said, with every ounce of belief I had within me, that we would walk through it together. Now, the truth is, I didn't feel powerful in that moment. I didn't feel that I had any particular presence, and I certainly didn't feel heroic. What I felt was responsible for telling the truth and for staying committed for the days that were ahead and for not abandoning the weight of that moment. Now, here we are decades later. I've reflected so many times since then on this moment. If there was any presence in that room that day, I think it didn't come from me being strong. I think it came from me choosing to be committed. And I think the people felt that. And in the months that followed, it's such a great story now that the company did recover and eventually went back to setting new records greater than the old ones. But in all those years that followed, I've thought many times about whether or not the turning point in the whole story began that day when we faced that hard chapter together with honesty and candor and commitment. So ever since that day, I've really stopped thinking about presence as a skill. And today I think about it more as a way of being. Because leaders with real presence, well, they don't rush. They don't inflate themselves. They don't perform strength. They carry conviction. They speak with calm because they aren't trying to outrun their own fears. And they bring clarity, not because they know everything. In fact, most of the time they don't, but because they've learned to see the few things that truly matter. And when they connect, it has a kind of easy grace to it because they're not distracted by the terrible task of proving themselves to everyone. You see, at the end of the day, presence isn't dramatic. It's quiet, and people feel it immediately. So right now, the world you and I are leading in, leaders are navigating some of the hardest conditions I've ever seen in my whole career. The people who follow them are stretched beyond belief. The expectations are rising. And worst of all, the pace of it is so unforgiving. So in times like these, I want you to know that presence becomes more than just a leadership quality. It becomes a culture stabilizer. In fact, a leader with presence lowers the temperature in the room. When they begin to speak, people breathe easier and they think more clearly. And best of all, they feel they can trust more deeply. Presence is that thing, that says it without words. It says we're going to face this and we're going to face it together and we're going to come out the other side. So if this resonates, here's something simple I want to suggest you try this week. Before you walk into your next meeting, pause. Stand outside the door where no one can see you for 10 seconds and ask yourself two pivotal questions. Number one, do I have the courage to face everything that's in front of us? And two, am I fully committed to walking through every step of it with this team? Now, if your answer to both questions is yes, your presence will be felt before you walk through the door. Not because you're performing, but because you're carrying truth. And in leadership, carrying truth is the weight people trust most. So thanks for leading with conviction and with humility and with the kind of presence that the world needs now more than ever. And I hope today's episode has been one that will give you a guide for the days ahead. And by the way, if you know someone who's feeling the same weight, who's searching for the same kinds of answers, would you just forward them this newsletter? Just take the email and send it right over to them. You may never know how much it helps or how valuable they will find it or all the people they may in turn send it to as well. We can make a real difference with a message like this in times like these. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Execution Insights, and I look forward to seeing you again next week when we'll be diving even deeper into the inner life of a leader and how to reach the level of legacy and greatness we've all aspired to. Until then, I'll see you soon. I'm Jim Huling. This is Execution Insights.